people in the broader LGBT plus community who want to divide us into factions. And I don't believe in that. And I think it's sad because I think sometimes the people who felt most isolated in their teenage years for being gay or lesbian or trans or just unusual, sometimes they pick up the weapons of their own high school bullies. And sometimes it feels like they have an emotional need to marginalise others. Hello, glowworms. I want to get something off my chest. And I don't mean these bazooms. I want to let you in a little bit to the mind of a disgruntled artist. You all know, I'm sure, that I have a podcast called The Vanity Project with me, Vanity Von Glow, where I have conversations with media personalities, performers and politicians. A few weeks ago, I interviewed the Labour MP Jess Phillips on the podcast, and it has ruffled some feathers, and I'd like to address that. So Jess Phillips is something of a centrist. So she's too progressive for some people, and she's not progressive enough for others. And some people have been contacting venues that I perform in trying to persuade them to cancel my shows. They're asking, why would you book Vanity Von Glow to come and sing Tina Turner and Celine Dion and ABBA songs when she's been having conversations with Labour MP Jess Phillips? And it's not because of anything I've said, it's because Jess Phillips said that she believes that there is a difference between sex and gender, and that she thinks it's possible for you to change your gender. She doesn't think it's possible for you to change your sex. And of course, she's an elected member of parliament, so she's got 260 times more followers than me on Twitter. The only other interview she did last month was with a national newspaper. And yet these people are criticising me for platforming her. Now, obviously I actually don't care about being criticised, and I don't even mind being ostracised by people I've never met. But I do care about people trying to lose me my work. That's my definition, and always has been, of cancel culture. Never mind that the fabulous Dawn Butler, a staunch ally of the LGBT plus community, was here just a few months ago breaking things down on this very podcast. Never mind that this week's guest is Amy LeMay, and she says on this week's episode that she believes trans women are women. Never mind that Lorraine fucking Kelly has been on the podcast expressing that trans women are women. Never mind that we've had trans women and also gender non-conforming people on the podcast regularly. No, of course, when these people bother the inboxes of venues I perform in, all they have to say is that I interviewed this gobby centrist, Jess Phillips, and that they feel it should cost me my living. Now, as it happens, these shows went ahead despite the complaints, and in fact were rammed to the rafters because people love Celine Dion songs, and everyone had a fabulous time. So that's not exactly what this video is about. What I'm worried about is that there are people in the broader LGBT plus community who want to divide us into factions. And I don't believe in that. And I think it's sad because I think sometimes the people who felt most isolated in their teenage years for being gay or lesbian or trans or just unusual, sometimes they pick up the weapons of their own high school bullies. And sometimes it feels like they have an emotional need to marginalise others. And the thing is that what I've learned is that people are only marginalised when they're seen as just one thing. And we've been talking about this on the podcast. So Panty Bliss came to the Vanity Project and talked to me about how being seen as whole people and not just gay people was important in changing attitudes in Ireland towards the equal marriage referendum. Drugs activist Peter Crykent told me about how one of the problems homeless drug users face is being seen as junkies rather than as whole human beings. Sadie Sinner came on the podcast. She's the curator of the Cocoa Butter Club, which puts on shows where performers of colour are centred and celebrated and share their experience on stage as whole human beings. So it's almost a theme at the Vanity Project. So when I spoke to Jess Phillips, I wasn't surprised that she talked about her family her work with women, her job as a parliamentarian, and her aspirations for leadership, and yes, her opinions, because she was many things at once. And I was speaking to a whole human being. When I spoke to Rebecca de Havilland, who underwent Ireland's first transition surgery and works with homeless LGBT people, she told me, and it's all in her book, about her life of addiction and romance and professional success and professional failure and sobriety and inner peace. Because together we were speaking as whole human beings. So on my podcast, we see guests as whole people, not just as avatars for a political position that you don't like. Now, I'm not too marginalised, or maybe I am. I'm not too worried about being marginalised myself, because I think life's experiences of being adopted, of being an effeminate gay man, and I suppose you would say gender non-conforming, all of these things have given me a unique marginal perspective that I wouldn't surrender. I'm a drag queen, so I consider being marginal a superpower. But that said, I think there's a difference between being marginalised and being isolated. I don't think I've said this before, but with the exception of an early childhood in foster care and the hard work of processing its effects on me as an adult, being cancelled in 2018 was probably the hardest thing that I've gone through. Cancellation makes people social pariahs, and it seeks to cost them financially and to run them out of town, and in some cases to destroy them completely, entirely. So that's what I talk about when I talk about cancel culture. I talk about people losing their work and being unable to pay their rent and having their lives thrown into chaos. You know, we say that we're worried about this cost of living crisis, but do we only care about it when it's people who agree with us? You know, and I had it light. Like, my work life and my social life didn't actually collapse in on itself. It took a severe hit, but I'm grateful to the people who understand who I am as an artist and as a human. But the fact that I didn't throw myself off a bridge or dissolve into nothing doesn't mean it wasn't a downright horrendous experience. And it did take me a matter of years to, refortify my psyche and to find my feet and my voice and my sense of being whole again. So my hope is that this podcast encourages people to let go of the instinct to cancel and the resentment driving it. Don't hate the haters so much you become one yourself. Anyway, I have a responsibility to myself to learn more about other people's perspectives, not less. I'm trying to get the balance right on the podcast. One week we have something light, like the entertainer Christina Bianco, or one week we'll have something a little more complex, like activist Peter Tatchell. And I'm going to interview who I want to interview because it is the Vanity Project. And I am vanity.